Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. Today we have a photographer on, Kirsty. She is going to help us learn a little bit. I know I certainly could use some help about photographing our artwork and tools and all these different things. Welcome so much to the show, Kirsty. I'm really happy you could take some time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Kirsty. It's wonderful to see you today.
And you, finally.
I know. Me and Kirsty have known each other quite a few years, and it's so lovely to finally meet her face to face-ish.
Yeah.
I want to start asking how you first got interested in photography. Like, how old were you? What were you doing?
Well, I was always into photography from when I was quite young. My dad was really into his photographs. He would always have a camera somewhere at a party. So you'd have a camera shoved in your face at some point, usually when you're drinking or eating or something like that. So we've got thousands and thousands of photos that, my dad took over the years. And then I started getting interested in it as well. And then kind of didn't sort of pursue it so much. But then as I got older, I wanted to do something artistic because we're quite an artistic kind of family. And I'm not very good at drawing or anything like that. So I thought, let's give, photography a go. I met a team of people that was photographing my brother's wedding, and we were talking about cameras, and I had my new digital camera that I didn't know how to use, and they suggested I go on a few courses with them, photographing models, and they give assistance. And I thought, well, we'll give it a go and see if I like it. And after that, I was completely hooked. So that was pretty much how I started.
Awesome. So what was the first things they taught you when you first started? What did they start with?
They started very much with how to position a model, because I didn't know how to instruct somebody. Having that confidence to actually say to somebody, I want you to stand this way, I want you to do this, even though the models tend to know the positions and sort of do it automatically, you sometimes kick yourself afterwards and think, I would have loved to have taken a photo of them doing this pose or that pose. And it's just gaining that confidence to actually interact with the model and say, can you put your arm here? Can you put and position them in the way that you want them to be? And also they taught me a lot about lighting, where to put where shadows need to be, and, things like reflectors and stuff like that. So it was stuff that I'd never, ever ventured into, but there was assistance all the way through. And because we had groups of people that were from entry level to professionals, we all sort of gave each other tips and help and stuff like that. So it was really easy to kind of start understanding what we had to do and what settings we had to be at and things like that. Because, if you don't get your settings right, then, you won't get a good picture. So it's knowing what your setting needs to be at whatever speed and how much light you need to bring into the picture and things like that. So, I found that really, really helpful.
It can be quite complex, can't it? I mean, I did basic GCSE photography at college, room and all that. When you first started, were you using like an automatic digital camera, or did you go straight for the or like you say, the ones where you have to fiddle about with your settings and everything?
Well, my camera, the digital cameras have got automatic on them. But as soon as I went to the first course, it was like, no, you're not using automatic. We will get you sort of thinking about what your settings need to be. because automatic doesn't give you the best quality picture. So you need to know what kind of settings you need to be at. The faster a shot, obviously, you'll get a lot of like wobble and things like that. So you've got to make sure that, you may be using a tripod for that. And also, if you want more light coming in, it will be, you need to have your settings differently and things like that. So, it's pointing and shooting is great, but it doesn't give you the best quality pet photo. So,
this sounds so much like going to a life drawing class or something, and you're setting up, what you want to paint or draw, and you're considering the light, and you're considering the colors, or if you're going to do it monochrome or whatever, and now you're talking about your tools, which could be, of course, whatever medium you're using. That's really something to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been always taught, and I think it's really important that, okay, we've got Photoshop, we've got Lightroom and things like that, but I've always been told to get it right in camera, because you don't need to do much editing there. And also you can over edit, so it doesn't look great. So if you get it right in camera, then you don't need to do much work to get it edited, and it will always look right. So, what I used to do is always, if I had a particular course that I was doing and a particular model, I'd always write, like what lighting we'd use, what settings we'd use for, specific photos, whether we use reflectors and things like that. So I could go back to those later on if I did a photo shoot with a model on my own, because that was a big step for me, to go from photographing with a group of people that was a bit of my safety net, to then go, oh, actually, I'll try this on my own, and then think, what did we do again? So it's really helpful to sort of, keep a few notes of, what you've done, so you can refer back to them.
I think the point you made about, reflective, I think as artists we'd be really interested to know how to reduce reflection on your artwork as much as possible. Excuse me, to get a clear image. Would that be something to do with the way you've got everything lit as well?
Absolutely, yeah. What I tended to do was have a light sort of at the front and at the side. So it gives you can obviously move them around, which will give you, different shadows, whether you've got a full face or, a little bit of shadow here and things like that. So it always changes depending on where you move it to. But when you move your lighting, you have to make sure that your settings are right in your camera, because they will change. So we use like a light meter, which you put here, click the lights on, and it will give you your settings. So it really helps to sort of work out what you need to have in your camera in terms of how much, how fast the speed is, how much light you're letting in and things like that. So, that's really, really helpful. And then we tend to have a reflector sort of here, which bounces up, because then you won't get the shadow sort of here, because sometimes you can get quite a big shadow sort of underneath the chin when you're doing like portrait shots and things like that. So we tend to have a reflector sort of here, and then we can move it around. But a lot of the time it's just trial and error. It's moving, your lighting around, because you might want certain, shadows on one particular photo, or you might want, something different on another, depending on what the model wants or what you want. So, it's a case of, sometimes moving things around, looking, at what you've taken, and to see if that's what you want or if you want to change it. So, yeah.
What would you suggest for shooting flat subject like artwork, sketches? Do you think shooting inside or outside, one is better than another, especially for different mediums?
I've not really taken much photos of that kind of work. I have done products like beauty products for a hairdressing salon, and what I tended to do, you can get like a box which you can put your products in, and it sets it up, and it means you won't be getting all the light reflecting. So you can actually place them in there. So they are sort of, specifically for product placement.
Yes, I guess it would get rid of all the ambient lighting kind of thing, and you can control, especially if you have shiny things like, well, acrylic paint or even some papers are a bit shiny, and so I guess that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got something shiny, you've got to just make sure that obviously, you haven't got the light pointing directly at it, because it'll just bounce off and you won't get half the picture that you're taking, or anything like that. So you've just got to be mindful where your lighting is positioned, as to where it's going to hit. So you might want it sort of coming down as opposed to going straight at it. So it's a lot of it is down to making sure your lighting's right.
Yeah, I guess it would be. What's your favorite thing to photograph? Although I have a feeling I know what the answer is, but doing either products or people, and if it's one or another, do you have a situation that you really like to? Do you like to tell a story in your photographs?
Well, I'd like to say neither of those are my favorites.
I missed on that one.
Because I've taken photos of a lot of people's pets. So I've done a lot of dogs, mainly. Some of my own cat, who's been on Christmas cards. But rescue dogs, mainly what I've done, especially for ones that are looking for homes. So I've had them in the studio. I've done a calendar for greyhounds, which was interesting because unfortunately the dogs had been mistreated and have never had any sort of training or anything like that. So it was very hard to get them to sort of stand in certain ways and things like that. But I find those the most enjoyable because they're a little bit more challenging. And what I tend to do with those, especially with people, if they're bringing their own pets in, is to let them go around the studio, have a bit of a sniff around, have a look around, get themselves comfortable, and then treats are the most important thing. And just for them to be happy in the environment, and then I can start. And sometimes they don't even know I've started. So, but again, they do need to be in a specific area because of the lights as well. So, we do tend to say, most of the people that book us, used to book us, was people that had like trained pets and things like that. So it was quite easy to do. But it was lovely because some of them, unfortunately, are no longer with us, but they've got pictures of their dogs that they've kept, and are really pleased with. So, it's lovely when somebody comes back and says how, pleased they are with their photos. So it makes it all worthwhile.
Oh,
bless. Everybody likes a photo of their pet, don't they?
Absolutely. And, I really enjoyed those because I got to spend time with the dogs as well. So, it was a kind of win-win situation. So, yeah.
For a beginner, what kind of equipment would you suggest that they used?
I would say to get an entry-level camera. Don't spend an absolute fortune on one first, because I have always said that the best photos I've ever taken was from my entry-level camera. And I always say that it tends to be the person that's taking the photo as opposed to the equipment that you're using. If you know what you're looking at, then you can take a good photo no matter what you're using. So, you know, some people have taken amazing photos just using an iPhone because they know, you know, how to take a photo and what it should look like. I mean, there's things like rule of thirds that people have to be sort of a bit conscious about, especially with like landscapes and things like that. So, you know, you obviously have your rule of thirds, you know, where, you know, maybe the sky is a third and the rest is 2/3, and or vice versa and things like that. So, you know, but I would always say go for the entry level, book yourself on a few courses first before you start investing, because some people, it might not be for them, or they might think this is great and then decide to purchase something a bit better later on. What I did is I purchased better later on, and also got some lighting equipment, but only because I was doing my own photo sheets and I was finding that, you know, I liked my own lighting and I knew how to use it. But a lot of studios, if you book them and you rent them out, they'll have their own lighting equipment as well. So, but sometimes, you know, it's quite nice to invest in the lighting, but I would say do that sort of as a later on sort of investment, as opposed to, you know, deciding you want to take photos and then spending an absolute fortune on getting loads of equipment and thinking it's not really for me. So,
may I ask what your entry-level camera is?
It was a Nikon, and I can't remember for the life of me what it was, but I think it was D3200, I think, because that was quite a few years ago. So I've now got rid of that, and I've got a Canon now, which is a lot more fandangled and very, you know, top of the range, but I still do the same thing that I did with my entry-level camera. So it's not really, like I say, it's down to the person that's taking them as opposed to the equipment. So if you use an entry level, you can still get amazing photos.
So you don't really have an opinion then? Well, I mean, I'm sure you do, but I mean, you don't really see much of a difference then between, say, traditional cameras and digital cameras from a result point of view. It would really depend on your own skill on how you use your tools.
I would say so, because I've only really used digital cameras. I mean, years and years ago, I used to use obviously ones that, you know, you had the, you know, like the Olympus with the, you know, the rolls and stuff, and have to get them sort of, yeah, and get them all, you know, sort of done and everything. But that was something that would have just been like holiday photos and things like that. So it wasn't really, you know, models or any, you know, anything that way. So I've only really been involved in using digital for my work. So I would say digital is really good, because obviously, you know, with your editing and things like that, you've got that option, as opposed to using a traditional camera where you've got to do the processing and things like that. I would love to be able to try that, because I think it's really interesting to go back to, you know, basics and using the old traditional ways. But I haven't got a dark room that I can that I can use at the moment, unless I, you know, use my husband's shed or something. But you know, I think that is quite interesting, but I think it's a whole different thing that somebody would need to get involved in, as opposed
my mother used to have a Leica camera. She, you know, one of these like really old-fashioned things, you know, that she actually let me play with when I was a really small kid. She's a much better person than I was for that. But yeah, she let me play with that like a little bit. And holy moly, those things are really complicated. You know, you have to be prepared still to spend a bit of money on developing film that you're never going to do anything with. Because you can't see an edit and say, nope, trash, trash, trash. You can't
That,
do that on those.
No, you
that's,
have to stand
that's a,
there doing that with your solution, and then it comes through, and you're like, oh, I messed it up.
yeah.
Mine's so fuzzy, a lot of them, and it's like,
Yeah.
like you say, you're learning how to use the camera, aren't you? But
Yeah.
I
think,
sorry, go on.
Sorry. Yeah, I would say that that's why I always say, get it right in camera, because, if you're happy and you've got it right, then, you'll put your memory card in and they'll be there, and, there should be perfect. And there shouldn't be much sort of editing, but that's the beauty of the digital cameras, is that you have got the option to edit and Photoshop, but I do find Photoshop can be overused. So
Yeah, I know what you're saying with that. You can go a bit overboard with it, definitely. Lose a bit of charm.
yeah, absolutely. I think, just the minimum. If you want to change a photo to black and white, do that. Or if you want to maybe lighten it slightly, or, but, over editing, you can tell.
So the basics of composition, they apply just as strongly to creating a photograph that will say something to someone as it would to creating a piece of art that someone would want to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And, because I've photographed bands for their artwork. So I've had them in the studio, and I've also taken photos of them while they're performing and while they're practicing and things like that. And it's really important to capture, that moment. And as mad as it sounds, it's the same with pets as well, to capture that particular look, and that, and then to say that's my dog, that's what they usually do. And it's just having that patience and just having that eye to go, right, that's the one I want to take, that's a picture that I wanted to use.
And then sometimes chance, I would guess, every once in a while too, you have to kind of be there and be aware, and I would guess actually photographing bands while they're playing and all, that must be like a real challenge.
It can be. I've done a few. I actually did one where there was a band and they were doing their practice run, and the studio was probably smaller than around about the same size as an average shed. So it was really, really small. And I was literally against the wall in the corner trying to take photos of the drummer, the keyboard player, the singer, the guitarist, and we were all cramped in this little room. So, you have to kind of know when to take a photo and which one's going to be the best ones, and just I think you have to just gauge it and sort of see what's happening and what they're doing, and then you then can see and go, yeah, that's the one I want to take. And it's just having that eye, I think, sometimes, and just having that patience.
When it comes to people, photographing people and all, what has been your favorite photograph to date?
Oh, today, that's a very good question.
I know which one mine is. Of
you
yours.
You tell me what yours is.
I love the Afro Lollipop.
The Afro Lollipop is probably, yeah, I would say I actually agree with that. I did a photo shoot. This was quite early on, again with my entry-level camera, and it was a lady, and she had a bright blue afro wig on, and she had bright coloured bows in her hair, and she had yellow sunglasses on, and she had a sweet in her mouth like this, and it was just, I just captured it perfectly. I was just so happy that I got this photo, it was just the symmetry and everything like that. And I'm a bit geeky with stuff like that, but it's just really just the symmetry of it, and everything was just perfect. And my husband got it put on a massive canvas that's now in our living room. So it looks so good.
Oh wow!
It really does like jump out at you. You do well. Obviously, I remembered it, and I think a lot of people did. I think you did some quite gritty black and white ones at one point. I seem to remember quite a gothic chair or something like that.
Yeah, there was a girl called Lucy. She was very tattooed, and there was a photo of her in a chair, black and white, really kind of moody. It was in a warehouse, so it was quite gritty. But again, I think that one was quite good. But again, with my entry-level camera, that I'd literally started taking photos then. So, you know, it's like I say, it's not always the expensive equipment that gets the really good shots. It's just knowing that that is the picture you want to take, and having the confidence to say to that person, can you stand this way? Can you look this way? Because there's nothing worse, because a lot of the courses you have to pay for, and you don't want to go away with a lot of pictures that you think, I wish I'd said that. I wish I'd took that photo. Or if you see another photographer that was on the course that's taken that photo and you think, I wish I'd done that. So, you know, it's just having that confidence to, you know, sort of interact with them and, you know, get the pictures that you want to have.
Do you have any tips for artists who want to photograph themselves with their artwork? Because I see quite a lot of those kind of posts going on social media, and they seem to get more interaction when the artist is with their piece of work rather than just the piece of work. I mean, it's a bit of a controversial subject because you'll get a lot of people complaining and saying, we just want to see the artwork. And then other people sticking up for them going, no, it's great. I like to see who did the artwork. So
I think it's always good to have a face to the work that, you know, that you're doing, because you know, you want to be proud of what you've done. And I think people should know who is behind, you know, the amazing cards that you do, and, you know, and artwork. And, you know, I think it's really important. But I would say probably get somebody else to take the photos, because I think it would be really difficult to sort of set up something maybe with or with their timer or something like that, and you end up sort of rushing back, and you know,
it's so hard to do that.
I just end up falling over or something, just having a photo of me just sort of launching myself.
I keep dropping my phone when I try to do selfies with me and an art or something else, or what. I don't know how people do it.
Yeah, I would probably say get somebody to take them for you, because you know I think it'd be too difficult to do it with, you know, just yourself. And also it's hard, especially if your artwork's quite big as well, to capture all of it together, especially if you're sort of having the camera and sort of trying to do it that way. But I think people want to see who's behind the work. And I think, you know, I think I would personally prefer to see who's doing the work than not.
I got to agree with you. You talk a lot about light and the way the light has an effect on your subjects and things. I'm wondering, do you prefer like natural lighting over artificial lighting? What do you think the difference is between natural light and artificial light on color?
I would say artificial light's probably better when it comes to color, because it's more controlled. I think because it's more controlled, because, you know, I've done ones using neon body paints, and that was probably the most challenging photos I've ever done, because we had to we basically made our own neon lights, using, sort of boxes and switches and all sorts of weird and wonderful things, to photograph this lady who was completely black, but then had neon different colours all through her. But we had to have the lights off to photograph her. So it was literally a case of being in the dark and then having the neon lights to come on when we press the trigger. So that was quite tricky.
That must have been gorgeous.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. It
Can't
worked.
Imagine what that must have looked like. That wow.
It's pretty amazing. I'll have to send you one of the pictures, but it was.
I'd love to see that.
It was really cool. But I think when it comes to colour, I find that I think the lighting's better controlled. I like natural light, but again, you can't move it. You have to move the subject around as opposed to the actual lights around. But I have done that as well. And I've got some amazing shots from a model using just natural light coming from a window. So, it's, I think with colour, I think it's, especially if it's bright, sort of vibrant, and you want a punch, I think you need to have that controlled lighting.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. I had always been told in my art classes that natural light was, you don't break that rule. It's got to be natural light all the time. But I can understand totally what you're saying, that you can control it easier with artificial light. I find and I'm sure Lindsay would too, as when for instance, as a blue, which of course is a primary color, you have many different kinds of blue, but blue will look different in a natural light, be it in the shade or the sun, or when you bring it inside and you have like a cold light or warm light. So how do you control that?
Yeah, absolutely. Things are different depending on what kind of lighting you're using. It just depends on what kind of effect that you want to achieve. Because if you want natural lighting, then that's perfectly fine, and you can use whatever you've got available. Like I say, I did a photo shoot for a model, and it was all natural lighting as opposed to controlled lighting. But then we did another shoot with her using controlled lighting, but it was mainly for kind of high fashion as opposed to sort of a photo of her against a window or something like that. And she did tend to have like underwear on, so it was quite a soft, nice light, whereas the controlled lighting is quite harsher. So it was getting that lovely softness from using the natural light, but for what I wanted on the high fashion shoot, it was very punchy and very, you wanted that kind of control on the lighting. So which tended to be in a studio with a backdrop, with the lights sort of in a position that where you can capture it exactly how you want it. So
that is fascinating. What do you think? What would you suggest to a beginning photographer? It's very overwhelming. For instance, if they want to shoot something to draw from or to sketch from, and they want to kind of learn how to shoot something on their own, what would you be your first direction for?
I would probably, what I did is I went on, like I say, I went on a few courses, a few night classes with, loads of different photographers who have done anything from landscapes to models to, and you can kind of get a few tips from them. There's a lot of places that do specifically for instance, we've got the Birmingham Botanical Gardens, and we went there to photograph flowers and waterfalls and different things like that. So it was a completely different, different environment where you're outside, you haven't got control over any of the lights whatsoever. And you've got to think about where the sun is, where everything is. And I would say to maybe do a few basic courses first and just get the foundations of things like rule of thirds, things like shutter speeds, also the lighting inverse and stuff like that. So, just getting the kind of basics, and then you can go from there. I think unless you know things like why you need a shutter speed, why you need your aperture, and things like that, then you'll kind of get a bit confused as to why you need certain things. I think once you've got those basics, then I think you'll be pretty good to go. And don't be afraid of just going out and trying it on your own and seeing what you get.
Especially with the digital cameras, where you don't have to worry too much. If you don't like what you've taken, you can just delete them.
Delete it. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't be afraid of the camera, and just have fun with it. I think it's worrying about getting the right pictures at the beginning is just don't worry about it. Everybody makes mistakes. I've looked at my first photos and thought, oh goodness, I'm they're not really great, they're not brilliant. And then you can sort of see as you go on the kind of progression, and you sort of think, yeah, I've really learned quite a lot now. But yeah, I think it's just immersing yourself in kind of a few different courses on different areas, depending on what you want to do. I mean,
so curiosity can serve you well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think, some people want to go into it to do weddings and things like that. I mean, I just wouldn't want the pressure of sort of doing anything that big, because especially now there's so much sort of Photoshop and different things, and people want all sorts of weird and wonderful photos. But I did take some photos of a band, and then he liked the photos so much that I did his wedding renewal. So him and his wife got remarried, and I took all his wedding photos, and he was really pleased with them. So, but it was nice because it wasn't pressurized, and we were just having a bit of fun with it. So it was quite nice. But I always say, if you're not enjoying it, then that's the time to sort of think about what you want to do.
That's kind of a bit of a key that I find that a lot of people that we talk to mention, the fun factor, even though, especially in this day and age, fun seems to be frivolous. It's actually, I think, a fundamental, like a foundation to being able to do something valuable, maybe, or worthwhile. Is that fun? A little bit of fun. If you don't have any fun,
it inspires you to keep going, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're enjoying it, then it's great. It really is, and you've got to be able to say, I'm happy with these photos. I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun. There's no pressure, and just do it in your own time. And if you want to pursue it as a profession, then go for it. But when it gets to the point where you think, I'm not enjoying it anymore, then that's.
Have you ever drawn sketched out a slight composition of what you might want to see in your photo, in a future photograph or something like that? Have you ever done that?
I have, yeah. I have done different sorts of scenarios and sort of setups, and thought about the lighting that I want, and
you find it useful?
Yeah, I definitely find it really useful, because sometimes you don't have much time in the studio, so you want to be able to use it as much as you can of the time that you've got. So, I mean, sometimes I would only have an hour. So it'd be a case of getting straight in there, getting my lighting set up, and then getting the person in, or the dog or whoever, and getting the photos done. So, you want to be able to have that already sort of planned ahead, that's what you want to do. But I'd never show my sketches because I can't draw. So
I'm sure that's not true.
I would love to say that I'm great at drawing, but no, my aunt is the artistic drawer in our family, not
but
me.
It is interesting to hear that, you're a photographer. We all use similar tools to try to create something. That I find it utterly fascinating to hear your view of it. And I think we're coming to the end of our available time.
Okay.
But this has been fascinating. I could talk to you for like 3 hours and listen to you say all these things. It's just wonderful. Your views on all of this. Now I want to go. Learn some more.
Yeah, definitely pick a camera up, and I'd love to see your photos.
Oh, so much for talking to us today, Kirsty.
Thank you so much, Kirsty.
Thank you so much for having me.
It has been wonderful to share all of this. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.